We are 66 times.
Hello again, welcome to 66 Times. My name's Peter Gurry and this is the 66 Times podcast. This is Series 1 and Episode 1. Now, it is quite timely at this point of recording. We're in the grip of COVID-19. With this in mind, we've dedicated the first series to the topic of recovering lost revenue in times of crisis. Now, that's a broad concept, times of crisis. Back in 2008, I co-created a business by the name of JBA, and it was the beginning of the global financial crisis. And we're going to draw reference to this moment in time where COVID is very much influencing the world, and the previous large blip on the radar, and what we may have learnt, or what we should have learnt, and how that can be applied to now. To make this series even more relevant and continually useful for the average business and the average marketer, I'm going to expand the concept of crisis. Now, obviously, crisis is applicable to COVID-19, SARS, the global financial crisis, but more importantly, crises happen every season, every marketing calendar. A business faces a competitive onslaught where the very nature of the program of work can actually be a competitive disadvantage if it is in fact inflexible and unable to respond, and hence rendered useless against unexpected competitive activity or market shifts. Now, by market shifts, I mean the dynamics that seem to be quite frequently popping up these days, where a new player reinvents the space. Now, every category, if your category hasn't already been interrupted, well, you would bloody well expect it to. Now, these guys come out of left of field, no one sees them coming, but ultimately they upset the apple cart. Oh, and let's not forget government policy and domestic and international markets. These all have fundamental effects on the way that we do business, not just the marketing, but the price of product. Now, what this podcast is going to be about this particular season is how on earth we reduce the time and increase the surgical precision of our response at that point. Because surely that's got to be the competitive advantage, knowing what to do when you're surprised, how to do it, and ensuring that delivery is swift and done without high cost, because often responses to crisis come at a cost itself. This includes rapid changes to media budgets and promotional budgets, mainly because it's easiest to do that. The only way businesses can really satisfy immediate results is throwing more coin at something that's relatively easily scaled. Now, that's not a long-lasting strategy. Some may say it is, however, it's high cost. If you're prepared to maintain such a high-cost strategy, well then great. However, there must be a more surgical, there must be a more precise way of responding. Surely, competitive advantage is in an acute sense of targeting, an acute spend, knowing exactly what to do and how to do it with minimal effort at a time when you're blindsided. To be able to respond surgically, cost-effectively, and with measured effect, without blowing the budget, surely must be something that we're all ultimately wanting to achieve. Let's talk about this in more detail, but first, let's set some context. So what was the global financial crisis, the GFC? Well, back in 2007, it stretched to 2009 from memory. Now, it largely stemmed from US banking practices where shenanigans were afoot. They lent a ridiculous amount of money to people who shouldn't basically have received it. This isn't an episode on the GFC, but what it is a discussion about how the GFC left the world market. Australia here, well, we got off relatively lightly, namely because of the extremely buoyant mining industry and everything that fell from that. But the rest of the world wasn't so lucky, especially the US. Here in Australia, we acted as if it was going to affect us critically. So therefore, the effects were in fact felt. In Australia, the biggest impact was strategy. Businesses changed their strategy. That also affected spend, that affected loss of jobs, etc. But I can remember, like I was saying before, starting a business when every business that we wanted to talk to was tightening its purse strings and really retreating back into themselves. This is why this particular series is going to be so interesting. What was affecting us as a fledgling business was the fact that businesses at the time of the GFC were doing what they always do when met with confusion, met with concern. They protect and look forward for ways to make up for lost revenue. They critique expenditure with an exceptional level of concern and conservatism, and ultimately go with what they know. Now, depending on the nature of the business and how conservative they are, how strong their brand is, a very strong brand-led business that tends to be more innovative will see times of competitive conservatism as opportunities to grow. Again, a different discussion. But most will look for means of cutting costs and then forward plan for revenue capture. And if you're new, or if you propose anything different, anything out of the ordinary, you bloody well better have a compelling story. With this, my dear listener, we near conclude our first episode. This summarises the challenges faced by businesses in moments of crisis, and how not only challenging the crisis itself is, but the response, and how maintaining and capturing revenue is so difficult. Here I introduce you to episode 2, where our focus will be on an actual example that was during the GFC that required creative problem solving and resulted in strong outcomes.